He was the bartender who rewrote what a hero looks like. Not a marble statue, but a bruised everyman limping through fire, with a half smile and a don't quit pulse. Bruce Willis built a fortune the hard way through night shoots, shattered sleep, and the kind of steel-nerved performances that made the world cheer and then fall silent. From a shaky childhood to the neon of Manhattan bars, from network TV lightning to the high-rise inferno of Die Hard, he turned doubt into dollars and scorn into legend. The number reads like a myth over $250 million, but the ledger tells a different story. A balance paid in bone-deep fatigue, private heartbreak, and a mind that, in the end, began slipping like film through trembling hands. There were mansions and lakeside retreats, yes, glass opening to California gold, Idaho water calm enough to quiet a lifetime of noise. A Porsche that purred like a secret, a Rolls-Royce that gleamed like a promise, and a work ethic that never blinked. But wealth is a poor translator for meaning. What he really collected were moments. Daughters asleep on his shoulder, quiet holidays where ex-lovers became lifelong allies, a wife who learned a new language touch, patience, presence when words dimmed. So when fans say he left behind a fortune, they aren't wrong, but they're not right either. Because the true inheritance is heavier and kinder than money, a blueprint for endurance, a lesson that courage is not the absence of fear, but the insistence on love when memory frays. The family tears aren't only grief, they're gratitude distilled to salt. They know the secret ledger of his life, the debts no headline can count, and still somewhere between the glass and the silence one last, unspoken truth waits to be told, and it changes everything. The numbers dazzled the world, but the origin of that empire began far from Hollywood's light, where hunger, humiliation, and a stutter forged an unbreakable will. Bruce Willis was never born to be John McClane. He was forged into him. The boy who once stuttered so hard that every word drew blood didn't come from privilege or spotlight. He came from the cracked sidewalks of New Jersey, from a house where the wallpaper peeled and arguments echoed louder than lullabies. His parents, an American soldier haunted by his own war, and a German mother who rationed hope like bread, taught him the first rule of survival. No one is coming to save you. If you want to stand tall, you build your own spine. That truth became his religion. When the family left Germany for the promise of America, they traded one kind of cold for another. Money was short, tempers were long, and Bruce, the eldest of four, became both shield and entertainer. He cracked jokes to distract his siblings from the sound of shattering plates, turned fear into humor long before cameras ever rolled. Stuttering was my first enemy, he would later say. Acting was how I beat it. On stage, words finally obeyed him. The boy who couldn't say his name without mockery suddenly found rhythm, voice, control. The silence that once humiliated him became the furnace that forged his confidence. When he hit 18, Willis walked out of New Jersey with nothing but a duffel bag and a defiant grin. He took acting classes at Montclair State, dropped out, and moved to New York City because hunger, real hunger, burned hotter than any ambition. He slept on couches, hustled through cold winters, worked security jobs, and drove limousines. But most nights, he was behind a bar in Hell's Kitchen, a cigarette tucked behind his ear, pouring drinks for strangers and performing monologues no one asked for. He called that version of himself Bruno, the bartender who could fill silence with swagger. Every night was practice, he later said. I just didn't know what for. And then, one day, fate ordered a drink from him. A casting director caught sight of the loud, funny bartender who didn't care what anyone thought. Within months, Bruce Willis was standing under studio lights for moonlighting. The camera adored what the streets had built. Wit sharpened by struggle, charm carved from pain. He wasn't the polished Hollywood type. He was something rarer, a working-class hero who didn't pretend to be bulletproof. That smirk, half rebellion and half defense mechanism, became legend. Within 2 years, he went from scraping tips to winning an Emmy and a Golden Globe, from counting coins to counting millions. But success doesn't erase the echoes of where you came from. For Bruce, every applause still carried the hum of factory nights. Every limousine ride still smelled faintly of spilled beer. He didn't chase fame, he outlasted it. What the world saw as confidence was, at its core, survival. Because behind the sunglasses and the laughter was still the boy from New Jersey, the one who knew that silence could swallow you whole unless you learned how to speak first. The boy who once fought to find his voice had become the loudest in the room. But in Hollywood, every echo fades, and for Bruce Willis, the next chapter would prove that even legends bleed before they shine. Before the roar of cameras, before the explosions and applause, there was only noise, the kind that lived inside small houses and broke children quietly. Bruce Willis was born on the 19th of March, 1955, in Idar Oberstein, West Germany, a town still dusted with the gray sorrow of post-war silence. His father, David Willis, an American soldier stationed abroad, carried invisible wounds from the battlefield. His mother, Marlene, a young German woman, tried to turn scarcity into comfort. There was little money and even less peace. Arguments filled the air like static, and the boy learned early to flinch at thunder and laughter alike. When Bruce was 2, the Willis family boarded a ship for America, chasing a promise painted on postcards, the land of second chances. They settled in Carneys Point, New Jersey, a working-class pocket of steel and smoke. But the dream was thin here, stretched over long hours and empty wallets. Their rented house sat beside train tracks, trembling each time a freight train screamed by. The sound became part of Bruce's heartbeat, restless, unstoppable, a rhythm he would one day turn into drive. His father found work in a factory, then lost it. He drank. His mother worried, stretched groceries into miracles, and prayed the roof would last another winter. The fights grew louder, and the love grew tired. By the time Bruce turned 16, the marriage had fractured into silence. "The day my dad left," he once said, "I didn't cry. I just watched his car disappear." The stillness that followed became a lifelong echo. As the oldest of 4, Bruce took up quiet responsibilities too heavy for a teenager. He protected his younger siblings from the shouting, cracked jokes to distract them from fear, and learned how to hide pain behind humor. Laughter became his armor, the first hint of the performer he would become. Yet inside, words betrayed him. He stuttered so violently that speaking felt like drowning. Every sentence was a battle, every classroom a war zone of humiliation. "It was like my mouth was full of cement," he later recalled. "I couldn't get a single word out. Kids can be merciless." They called him Buck Buck, mocking the way he stammered. He stopped raising his hand in class, stopped talking altogether. The silence turned inward, hardening into shame. That stutter, his invisible cage, would shape him more than any film role ever could. It taught him fear, then rebellion. He started pushing back against the world that mocked him. Small fights, skipped classes, detentions, tiny revolts against a universe that seemed to have decided his worth. Yet beneath the swagger was desperation, a hunger to prove he was more than the broken boy everyone saw. In the late 1960 seconds, while others chased teenage dreams, Bruce chased escape. And escape came, unexpectedly, under a spotlight. At 17, his high school teacher persuaded him to audition for a play. Terrified, Bruce stepped onto the stage and the impossible happened. The stutter vanished. Every word flowed like breath, every line sharp and effortless. The audience laughed, clapped, and something inside him cracked open. "That was the first time I felt free," he said years later. "Acting didn't just give me a voice, it gave me back my life." That night changed everything. He started performing in every school production he could find. On stage, the shy, angry boy disappeared, replaced by someone larger, funnier, unbreakable. For the first time, Bruce understood that strength didn't always come from fists, it came from facing what tried to silence you. When he graduated in 1973, the world expected him to find a job, not a dream. He ignored them all. With a suitcase, a few dollars, and the memory of applause still ringing in his ears, he left Carneys Point for Montclair State University to study drama. It was a decision as wild as it was necessary. He had no plan, no safety net, just a feeling that the stage was the only place where he could breathe. Those college years were hungry, uncertain, but alive. He devoured every class, every play, every moment of transformation. But soon the hunger in his stomach became louder than the hunger in his heart. He dropped out, boarded a bus to New York City, and walked into a dream that didn't want him. In the cold of Hell's Kitchen, among the cracked bricks and cheap neon, Bruce Willis began again, this time with nothing but willpower and wit. The stutter was gone, but the silence it left behind became fuel. He worked any job that paid: security guard, truck loader, bartender. He was poor, but defiant. And each night behind the bar, cracking jokes and lighting cigarettes, he was unknowingly rehearsing for the role of his life. Because before Bruce Willis became the man who saved the world, he was just a boy learning how to save himself. And when that boy finally walked into the audition room, that would change everything. 3,000 other actors had already failed. But fate was waiting for him, wearing a smirk that looked a lot like his own. By the time Bruce Willis set foot in New York City in the mid-1970 seconds, the skyline shimmered like a mirage, bright, untouchable, and utterly indifferent. He was just another face among thousands of dreamers who believed talent alone could keep the cold out. The city, of course, had other plans. Rents were merciless. Auditions were endless. Rejection was routine. But if there was one thing Bruce understood from Carney's Point, it was how to endure noise and hunger without breaking. He lived in cheap apartments that rattled when the subway passed beneath, worked odd jobs to stay alive, guarding warehouses, driving limousines for people who never looked back, hauling crates until his palms split open. Most nights, he was behind the bar at Kamikaze or Chelsea Central, serving drinks to people who didn't care who he was, people who were too busy numbing their own dreams. Yet every shift became a performance. Bruce would invent stories, mimic customers, turn the room into a stage. "It was the best acting school I ever had," he once said. "You learn timing, rhythm, character, and how to survive when nobody's watching." He auditioned relentlessly, standing in lines that curled around city blocks, only to hear, "Next," before finishing a line. Some casting directors didn't even look up. He'd walk home with frozen feet and empty pockets, humming to keep himself from sinking into silence. Each no became a scar, and each scar became armor. "You wear rejection like a second skin," he'd say later. "If it doesn't kill you, it makes you interesting." Still, there were small victories, theater workshops, off-Broadway roles that paid in applause instead of rent. In 1980, he landed a brief part in Heaven and Earth, and later appeared in Miami Vice and The Twilight Zone. These were flickers of recognition, but the real fire hadn't caught yet. He was good, but New York was crowded with good. What made Bruce different was his pulse. The swagger behind the bar, the quick wit, the laughter that sounded like rebellion, all of it came from the same wound. He didn't act to be famous. He acted because it was the only way he felt alive. In 1985, that pulse finally met destiny. ABC was casting for a new romantic detective series called Moonlighting. The producers wanted someone charming but unpredictable, an energy that couldn't be faked. Over 3,000 actors had already read for the role of David Addison, and every one of them was wrong. Then Bruce walked in unshaven, loud, half cocky, half tired, and the room changed temperature. He improvised, cracked jokes, flirted with the script, and turned a simple audition into a one-man show. When he left, the casting director said, "That's the guy. That's the future." Moonlighting exploded. Overnight, Bruce Willis became the voice of a new kind of hero, sarcastic, vulnerable, dangerously alive. He wasn't Hollywood handsome in the traditional sense, but he had something more valuable: authenticity. Viewers didn't just watch him, they trusted him. Within 2 years, he was winning Emmys, Golden Globes, and magazine covers that called him the coolest man on television. The bartender from Hell's Kitchen had become the toast of Hollywood. And yet, even at his peak, Bruce never entirely left that bar behind. He'd still walk onto sets like he was clocking in for another night shift, focused, restless, always moving. He worked like a man who couldn't afford to stop, maybe because he still heard that childhood silence waiting to swallow him if he ever stood still too long. Then came 1988, and with it the script that would burn his name into cinema forever: Die Hard. At first, the studio didn't want him. Too TV, too small, too sarcastic. They offered the role to Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Eastwood. Every action giant turned it down. Desperate, the producers called Bruce. He took it without hesitation. "I figured I'd get one good movie out of it," he later laughed. "Didn't realize it'd define me." On set, he didn't just play John McClane, he became him. The sweat, the blood, the exhaustion, it was all real. He performed his own stunts until injuries forced the crew to drag him off set. When Die Hard hit theaters, it detonated like a cultural bomb. Bruce Willis, the wisecracking everyman trapped in a skyscraper, became the template for modern heroism. Vulnerable yet relentless, sarcastic yet sincere, he showed that courage didn't need capes, it just needed a barefoot cop who refused to quit. The film grossed over $140 million worldwide and catapulted him from television star to box office royalty. His $5 million paycheck unheard of for the time shattered industry ceilings. Overnight, Bruce Willis was a movie star, a millionaire, a man who had outrun poverty, stuttering, and obscurity. The empire he dreamed of was finally real. But as he soon discovered, Hollywood is never satisfied. For every spotlight, there is a shadow waiting at the edge of the frame. And behind his effortless grin, that old silence, the one that had haunted him since childhood, was stirring again. Retention bridge. He had conquered television and redefined action cinema. Yet even as his star blazed higher, the same fire that made him unstoppable began to burn him from within. By the dawn of the 1,990 seconds, Bruce Willis wasn't just a star, he was a seismic event. He had done the impossible. Crossed from television to film, from lovable wisecracker to box office demigod. Die Hard didn't just make money, it changed the DNA of Hollywood. Suddenly, every studio wanted another John McClane. Every screenwriter tried to capture that same mix of humor and grit, and every audience expected their heroes to bleed before they won. Bruce's smirk became a symbol, the half grin of defiance that told you the odds didn't matter. That grin was worth millions. After Die Hard, the sequel deals came pouring in. $7 million, $10 million, then $15 million per film. In 1988, those numbers were unthinkable. But Bruce didn't just collect paychecks. He collected moments of control, proof that the kid who once stuttered in front of his classmates now commanded entire studios. Between Moonlighting and Die Hard, his fame burned so bright it began to distort gravity. Photographers stalked him. Tabloids built myths out of his jokes. He walked into a room and everyone turned. The bartender from Hell's Kitchen had become the unshakable king of cool. He didn't act like a Hollywood god, he acted like the guy who fixed your car, poured your whiskey, and then saved your life on his lunch break. That's what made him different. Then came 1994, The Rebirth. Quentin Tarantino called the film Pulp Fiction. The role, Butch Coolidge, the washed-up boxer trying to claw his way out of a losing world. Bruce didn't care that the paycheck was small. He saw himself in Butch, a man bruised but unbroken. That gamble reignited his entire career. Pulp Fiction won Cannes, conquered the Oscars, and painted Bruce Willis in new colors. The movie didn't just revive his credibility, it reminded everyone that behind the one-liners was a real actor, capable of stillness, fear, and strange tenderness. From there came The Fifth Element, 12 Monkeys, and Armageddon. He could play the savior, the soldier, the ghost, or the fool, and audiences would follow. He became the face of Hollywood's obsession with endurance, every character a reflection of his own survival. And then came The Sixth Sense in 1999. The performance was so restrained, so haunted, that it stunned the world. The film grossed over $670 million, earned 6 Oscar nominations, and gave us one of the most iconic twists in cinema history. Yet beyond the plot, it was Bruce's quiet ache that carried the movie. The man who once built his fame on action now shattered hearts through silence. "I see dead people," the boy whispered, and somewhere behind that line, you could feel Bruce seeing ghosts of his own. Youth, time, maybe the pieces of himself he'd lost to the climb. His name was everywhere. His bank account soared. By 2000, Bruce Willis's net worth had crossed $250 million. He bought a mansion in Beverly Hills with glass walls that opened to golden California skies. He purchased a 20-acre lakeside estate in Idaho, a refuge surrounded by pine trees where snow melted into peace. "It's the only place I can breathe," he said once. After decades of chasing noise, he had finally found stillness. Yet even in his success, there were fractures. The press mocked his ventures like the 1991 flop Hudson Hawk, which lost millions, but Bruce shrugged it off. "I've been broke before," he said. "I'm not afraid of failure." He didn't care about critics. He cared about legacy. What mattered was working, creating, staying alive in motion. He launched a band, the Accelerators, played harmonica like he did in the old bar days, and even released albums under his alter ego, Bruno. The public loved him not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He aged in front of us. The hairline receded, the jaw hardened, the jokes grew slower, the eyes deeper. He didn't hide behind youth, he leaned into it. While other stars chased cosmetic eternity, Bruce chased humanity. He was proof that heroes didn't have to be flawless. They just had to keep getting back up. Behind the scenes, his personal life reflected the same contradictions. Fame had given him everything, wealth, recognition, power, but it demanded everything back. Nights on set became years lost. Marriages strained, friendships thinned. The world saw the smirk. His family saw the exhaustion. Every dollar I ever earned, he once admitted, came from time I'll never get back. Still, he kept going not because he wanted more fame, but because he didn't know how to stop. He had been running his whole life from silence, from fear, from the boy in New Jersey who once froze mid-sentence. On screen, he was invincible. Off screen, he was just tired. But the fire didn't fade. Even into his 60s, he filmed nonstop, thrillers, dramas, indie projects, big-budget sequels. He couldn't bear the idea of fading away. "The day I stop working," he said, "is the day I stop being me." He wasn't chasing the spotlight anymore. He was chasing the pulse. And yet Hollywood, always hungry for its next idol, had begun to shift. Superheroes replaced action men. CGI replaced grit. Bruce's kind of hero, human, bleeding, imperfect, was disappearing. But he didn't complain. He'd already said everything he needed to in one line, delivered barefoot and bloodied. Yippee-ki-yay. That was Bruce Willis at his peak, the immortal everyman, both godlike and fragile. He wasn't just Hollywood's hero. He was its mirror. But even legends can't outrun the quiet. Behind the roar of success and the glow of fame, a darker story was beginning, one that no camera, no stunt, and no script could save him from. Today, at 70, Bruce Willis lives a life far removed from the chaos that once defined him. The red carpets are gone, the cameras have stopped flashing, but the light that made him unforgettable still lingers softer now, filtered through the leaves of his quiet California home or the pines of his Idaho retreat. He wakes not to the call sheets of studios, but to the gentle rhythms of ordinary mornings. Birds, sunlight, the faint laughter of his daughters drifting from another room. His wife, Emma Hemming Willis, keeps the world at bay. Around Bruce, she has built not a mansion, but a sanctuary, one made of calm, care, and unwavering devotion. She is no longer just his partner. She is his compass, guiding him through the fog that his mind now wanders. Life is smaller now, not diminished, but distilled. The days revolve around simple joys, family walks, music, shared meals, the smell of pine and rain. Some afternoons, Emma says, Bruce hums tunes from his Bruno days, the same melodies that once filled smoky New York bars decades ago. He doesn't remember the lyrics anymore, she said softly, but the music still lives in him. His daughters, all 5 of them, orbit close. Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah from his marriage to Demi Moore, and little Mabel and Evelyn, his 2 youngest, who bring the gentlest kind of laughter back into the house. They paint, bake, sing, tell stories. When Bruce joins in, even wordlessly, their faces light up. They've learned to understand his silence the way a musician understands rhythm, not through what's said, but through what's felt. There are moments, rare but radiant, when the old Bruce appears. That spark in his eyes, that familiar grin, the one that used to melt tension on film sets and make millions of strangers feel safe. Sometimes he'll just squeeze my hand, Emma shared. And in that second, I know he's still here. The world that once demanded everything from him now demands nothing. And for a man who spent a lifetime fighting, that surrender feels like peace. There are no premieres, no scripts, no headlines. Just family, memory, and the quiet dignity of being loved without needing to perform. Demi Moore remains a constant presence, proof that love, when it's real, doesn't expire. It evolves. She visits often, sharing dinners, birthdays, even holidays. He's surrounded by women who love him, she once joked, but the truth behind her laughter was pure devotion. Together, they have created something rare in Hollywood, a blended family that refuses to fracture, even in grief. Though Bruce no longer acts, his spirit continues to inspire beyond the screen. Emma has become an outspoken advocate for dementia awareness, turning their private struggle into a beacon of empathy. She speaks for caregivers, for families, for anyone walking that same uncertain road. I don't want our pain to be wasted, she said. If Bruce's story helps one person feel less alone, then that's how we keep him alive. And declares unstrapped. And in a way, that's exactly what she's done. Around the world, fans write letters, share memories, post clips from his films, tributes to the man who taught generations that bravery could be funny, flawed, and deeply human. They don't mourn him as gone. They celebrate him as eternal. Each sunset feels like a curtain call, but one met, not with applause, with gratitude. Because somewhere between the roar of Die Hard and the silence of illness, Bruce Willis has revealed something no blockbuster ever could. The beauty of simply existing, of being seen, of being loved even when the words are gone. The hero may have stepped off stage, but his echo remains not in explosions or catchphrases, but in how deeply his story continues to touch hearts. And soon, that echo would turn into something far greater, a legacy that outlives the man himself. The legacy of Bruce Willis isn't written in box office numbers or trophies collecting dust in glass cases. It's carved into the cultural DNA of what we call the modern hero. Before Willis, action stars were superhuman men who barely bled, who delivered lines like gods reading from stone. Then came John McClane, barefoot, sweating, wounded, bleeding, real. Bruce Willis redefined masculinity in cinema, not by being indestructible, but by being human enough to hurt and keep going anyway. Die Hard became more than a movie. It became a language, a blueprint for every action film that followed. The smart-mouthed underdog who wins through grit, sarcasm, and sheer willpower that was Bruce's gift to Hollywood. From Speed to The Bourne Identity, every imperfect hero who limps, jokes, and bleeds his way to victory owes a debt to Willis. He taught audiences that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about moving forward while you're still afraid. But his influence didn't stop at the explosions. He blurred the lines between tough and tender. In The Sixth Sense, he played a man defined not by violence, but by vulnerability. That performance taught Hollywood something it had forgotten. Silence can be louder than gunfire. His restraint, his quiet grief, his haunted calm, they gave the supernatural heart. Critics called it his softest, strongest role. It became the blueprint for emotional storytelling in mainstream cinema. Off-screen, he changed the way the industry treated its stars. His record-breaking salary for Die Hard shifted how studios valued actors, opening the door for performers to claim their worth. He didn't come from privilege or pedigree. He fought his way to the top and dragged the ceiling higher for everyone behind him. And even as he built an empire, he never lost his working-class spirit. Crew members remember him not as a diva, but as the guy who shared jokes between takes and carried gear when nobody was looking. His colleagues from Samuel L. Jackson to M. Night Shyamalan speak of him not just as a legend, but as a mentor. He showed up, no matter what, Jackson once said. He didn't just act tough, he was tough. Shyamalan called him the soul of the ordinary man. That phrase, the soul of the ordinary man, may be the truest description of Bruce Willis's impact. He represented everyone who ever felt small, hurt, or overlooked, and made them believe that endurance could be heroic. And beyond the screen, his legacy lives through love. Through Emma's advocacy, through his daughter's laughter, through every fan who learned from him that strength can coexist with softness. In an era obsessed with spectacle, Bruce Willis reminded us that authenticity still matters, that the most unforgettable heroes aren't the ones who fly, but the ones who fall and rise again. Even his illness has become part of that legacy, not as tragedy, but as testament. The same courage that drove him through burning buildings now shows up in the quiet grace with which his family faces the unknown. They've transformed pain into purpose, shining light on dementia awareness and giving millions of families hope in the face of loss. So when people say Bruce Willis left behind a fortune, they're right, but not in dollars. His true wealth is measured in hearts moved, lives inspired, fears quieted. He gave the world permission to feel strong and broken at the same time. That is the rarest kind of immortality. But legacies are not just made of what we leave behind, they're also built on what we teach others to remember. And as the curtain gently falls on Bruce's story, one truth remains. Even in silence, his voice still echoes.